The big tech election interference in 2020 was an outrageous assault upon our republic and upon the American voter. Terrible thing has happened to our country. We're being laughed at all over the world. Our election has been studied by other countries. They're not going to do it that way. Mark Zuckerberg alone spent $400 million on election meddling. In virtually all of the key swing states, he funded unmanned and unprotected drop boxes that were deployed in Democrat-run cities and heavily Democrat precincts to scoop up ballots which were supposedly 94, 95, 96% for Joe Biden because he campaigned so well from his basement. How about where Biden did substantially better in the swing states than Barack Hussein Obama with the black population? Now, even though he did terribly throughout the country, but in those 5 places, he did very well. You know about that, Louis, right? He did five places. He did very well. Beat Obama with the black population. I don't think so. But they practiced that and countless other schemes to illegitimately and illegally boost the Democrat vote. The drop boxes were often very late. Where are they? Where are they? What happened? They're supposed to be here. They're not. I can tell you what happened. Sometimes late by days in showing up to the vote counting areas. At the same time, the big tech giants worked together to suppress and diminish news coverage that was negative for Joe Biden. Look at all these stories that came up, and they were wiped out. Anything negative for Biden or the radical left Democrats, they just suppressed.
And, of course, the prime example that he went on to give was the Hunter Biden laptop story.
Well, if that was Don Jr.'s or Eric Trump's laptop, are you kidding me? We would know everything that was in it. But since it was Hunter Biden's, they squashed it.
Well, and to the extent that we do know a lot of what was in it, it gets coverage only in, outlets of a certain perspective. The connection, though, the connection between election influence and the class action suit that he filed against these big tech companies. A good piece by Vivek Ramaswamy in the Wall Street Journal. He is a successful tech entrepreneur. He's also the author of a book called Woke Inc., Inside Corporate America's Social Justice Scam. And he has it right when he describes the central claim of the class action suit filed by Trump against big tech companies. Basically, he says they're state actors, right? Because the First Amendment is a restraint on government, not private sector actors. So you have to make the case, and it's a difficult one to make, that a private actor is acting as a surrogate of the state or a co-agent with the state. And the argument is that the government granted them immunity from legal liability, that's Section 230 of the Comms Act, threatened to punish them if they allowed disfavored speech, and colluded with them in choosing the targets for censorship. And this is to what Trump was saying in terms of what was suppressed that was, almost inarguably newsworthy, and what was allowed, and was there collusion, if you will, between the two entities, between the government and these big tech companies. That's something he's going to have to prove. That's going to be very difficult to do. I still think that the case has a slim chance of success, but it is driving an important conversation, as we discussed last week. To continue that conversation, we're pleased to be joined by Amy Piekoff. She is the Chief Policy Officer for Parler, which is a build-your-own-castle competitor to Twitter, of course. Amy, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on, Dan. So I'm glad you basically summarized this case. This filing, I'm coming at this from the perspective of a libertarian voter. I've never voted for Trump. I voted for Gary Johnson. I voted for Jo Jorgensen. I'm not really a huge fan of Trump. But what's interesting is I think that this lawsuit, whatever chance it does have, and maybe I'm more optimistic than you are about it, this could be the perfect vehicle to solve this problem of big tech censorship. You laid out the case, and Vivek's piece, I took a glance at that this morning. It's excellent. It follows upon the piece that he did with Jed Rubenfeld back in January on this. theory. There's one aspect of it, which is that the Section 230 protections are arguably overbroad. The immunity is arguably overbroad. And this gives Congress more of an argument for the lever that they're trying to use against big tech, right? Because there are real problems with the immunity, the grant of the immunity, and what big tech has done. And both Republicans and Democrats have complaints about it. So they are exerting pressure. They are exerting pressure so that that immunity is exercised in the way that certain politicians want it to be. And this is a real problem. And as you said, also, there is, in certain cases, a bit of collusion. And Trump cites some examples in his lawsuit. So I'm cautiously optimistic that this lawsuit could be the way to do it. And here's why. If Congress was to pass an amendment to Section 230 right now with the Democrats in power, it would likely make that immunity contingent upon hate speech censorship,
right,
misinformation censorship, right? And so that would be built into law, whereas a lawsuit could do something very narrowly tailored and not create further entanglement between government and big tech. Because that's the problem.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
Yeah, but the flip side is this the purview of the courts or the Congress? And as you point out, with respect to some grumbling from both sides about the Section 230 protections, the problem is they have very different ideas about how to solve them, and they have more grumblings about each other than that section. And so, do you ever get anything other than speechifying? I'm not so sure on that. And also,
Right.
too, I mean, from the perspective of somebody representing a social media company, Parler, do you have concerns that the elimination of Section 230 protections, if not narrowly tailored, like you're saying, could boomerang on smaller players? We had this conversation with William Jacobson, who runs the Legal Insurrection blog and, of course, is a Cornell law professor. And, he had some protections, like, if I'm going to be considered a publisher because there's, for example, comments section to some of my articles, and I have to monitor those comments, then, I have the sort of legal exposure that I'm not looking for and really can't abide and still run my blog.
No, I mean, a repeal would cause a lot of problems, at least in the short term, while all the precedent was sorted out, right? But I think probably the most, kind of promising solution is one that could be achieved by this lawsuit, which is Justice Thomas has argued for a narrower interpretation of Section 230. So keep the existing language, but give it a proper interpretation. And people who want to read about that just need to read his statement when the Supreme Court denied certiorari in Malwarebytes versus Enigma. So that's Malwarebytes, as if it was all one word, versus Enigma. Reason Magazine had a nice write-up on that statement a while ago. And to me, that seems like the best way to go. And like I said, ironically, Trump's lawsuit might be the thing that could achieve just that solution and get away from this big brother entanglement between government and big tech.
Well, so you think this is going to go all the way to the Supreme Court?
I would hope. I mean, I don't know. They talked about he filed it in Florida and he should have filed it in California, and why did he do that and whatever. But all I know is that a lawsuit like this seems to me to be the most promising way to solve this problem properly.
Well, as a libertarian, what about, the posture that, hey, go build your own castle. Jack Dorsey built his and Mark Zuckerberg built his, and Sergey and Larry and Sundar built theirs at Google. Hey, stop bitching and do what Parler's doing. Go build your own castle and compete with these companies.
Well, so obviously we've been doing that at Parler, and what we've bumped up against now is, I think, arguably an instance of this entanglement. So, Amazon got very, very powerful in part due to the government lockdowns. The government-imposed lockdowns made them have a whole lot more cash on their hands. In addition, they ended up working, they have taken on Twitter as one of their big clients as of December of this past year. And it could also be that, some people in Congress were also pressuring, because what was happening in January when we were deplatformed, We were deplatformed on the very week that Trump was banned from Twitter, and he was rumored to be coming over to Parler. And then suddenly we get these notices that we're going to be taken down off of our servers.
Mm-hmm. And I'm sure people are interested since you're back up and running and you're on to somebody else's servers than Amazon's, which is always a good idea, sort of a cautionary tale. Don't expect your enemies to provide you infrastructure or any sort of aid and support. But how is Parler doing these days? What's the plan going forward?
So we are doing well. We have rebuilt everything from the ground up. So not only the stack that provides the access to the internet and the server capacity, but also the code base. And so what we're doing on a daily basis is our development team is hard at work improving and bringing back some of the more, kind of nuanced features that we had before. And we are ready to continue to fight this free speech battle. We need to provide a platform that is viewpoint neutral, that everybody can come and think for themselves. They're not going to be told what they should think about a particular topic, what they should write and say. On Parler, the feed that you get is the feed that you ask for. And with respect to all legal speech, we put the tools into the hands of individual users to decide what's in their feed. We're very optimistic that this is the way to go for the future.
So the concern about Parler going forward, I mean, for me as a user, would be, can you get people that are center left or even further left, if you want, the influencers in these the institutional influencers, those are far left, so you have to get them too. Can you get them in the same place the way that so many are on Twitter, so that you can have that back and forth? Because if it's just an echo chamber for conservatives, it gets a little boring. Now, at the same time,
Definitely.
in order to get that more expansive audience, then you're also going to have to deal with the balance of, cranks and trolls who use language that's unacceptable. And so how do you monitor that? I mean, it's easy to say free marketplace of ideas. It's a little bit harder to manage in a way that's attractive to get the kind of audience you want. And so I wonder, how you're trying to thread that needle.
Yeah, so what we do, again, a lot of this kind of speech that you're talking about, the trolling stuff, is legal. It's perfectly legal. And philosophically and normatively, everything, I think the best way to do this is to put the tools in the hands of the individual user. And that's what we've done. As we've come back online, we've brought online some AI that will allow us not only to get rid of the incitement, the actual violent content that's illegal, but also to create a filter for the trolling content that we put in the hands of the individual user. Now, Apple requires that you remove all such content for from any iOS app. That's their choice, and I think they're wrong in that. But what I do think is right is to give users the tools that they can use to exclude that from their feeds and to provide them the experience that they want on Parler.
Now, what's the latest with getting President Trump on Parler?
I know that we are eager to have him. Again, I'm sorry I didn't vote for him, but we welcome him. We want to allow his viewpoint to be expressed as well as everybody else. So I think there are some discussions about inviting him over. Whichever platform does get him, of course, will end up getting quite a bit of traffic, so it would be a great thing. But I gather he's weighing his options.
You should try and woo Amy over, too. She's got a lot of followers.
No,
But she's been conditioned by all this, like, give me concert tickets, give me a gun, give me whiskey to get the vaccine. So you're going to have to give her something.
He's kidding. Yes, I am signed up to Parler.
Oh, you are?
But I haven't parlered lately.
All
Is
right,
that the verbiage you use? Like when you're on Twitter, you tweet. When you're on Parler, you do what, Amy?
You parlay.
You parlay. Okay, well,
That's a gambling term. Maybe that'll get it. Maybe that's good enough to get her in since she's a lotto junkie.
I like it.
Yeah.
And you guys have to give me your username so I can follow you over there.
All right. Mine is
Jacobson.
Mine is at Dan Proft. Just my name.
Wait, hold on.
Yeah,
hold on.
there you go.
Wait, I got to find my Parler app.
If we got to get the chief policy officer follows us, that'll be good standing.
That would be
for us
huge.
on Parler.
I think I'm Amy Jacobson. I mean, I know my name is Amy Jacobson with an O, not an E. but I don't know what my
Okay.
Parler. Oh, here it is. Here it is.
Yeah,
Stand by.
just make sure, if you're going to go to iOS, download the latest version because they just updated it recently.
I'm Amy E. Jacobson.
What's the E stand for?
Okay.
Elizabeth.
Oh,
Elephant. My middle name's Elephant.
All right. All right. Well, this was fun, and including the sort of like the handle exchange. Amy Piekoff, Chief Policy Officer, easy for me to say, for Parler. I'm so excited she's following me. Chief Policy Officer for Parler. Amy, thanks for joining us, and continued success with Parler.
Thanks for having me on.
Thank you. And she joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
It's news, opinion, insight. This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
This is attorney Stephen Leahy. This isn't the first crisis we faced together. Back in 2008, business professionals in trouble sought help from bankruptcy attorneys, loan